The admission came out while my mother was stirring soup. Not during an argument. Not during a confession-filled meltdown. Just a quiet afternoon in my parents' kitchen, the windows cracked open, the smell of onions and garlic hanging in the air like nothing important was about to happen. "We always knew it wasn't your fault," my mother said casually, like she was correcting a detail in an old story. I froze where I stood, one hand resting on the counter. "What?" My mother didn't look at me. She kept stirring. "The whole thing," my mother continued. "What happened back then? We knew." My father was sitting at the table behind my mother reading the paper. He didn't look up either. My heart started beating faster, not with hope, but with dread. "Knew what?" My mother sighed, finally turning to face me. Her expression was tired, almost defensive, like I was forcing my mother to revisit something inconvenient. "That it was your sibling's mistake," my mother said. "Not yours." The room tilted. For a second, I genuinely thought I might be sick. "You knew?" I asked. My voice sounded wrong in my ears, thin and unfamiliar. "You knew it wasn't me?" My father folded his newspaper slowly, deliberately. He placed it on the table and met my eyes for the first time. "Yes," my father said. "Just that, yes." No apology, no hesitation, no sense that this was a revelation that might shatter someone. I swallowed hard. "Then why?" I asked carefully. "Did you let me take the blame for all those years?" My mother exchanged a look with my father. A look I had seen my entire life. Silent communication, already aligned. My mother spoke first. "Because your sibling wouldn't have survived it," my mother said. I stared at my mother, waiting for the rest of the sentence, for a qualifier, for something that would make it make sense. "There is no rest of the sentence," my father added. "They were fragile. You weren't." The word hit me like a slap. "You were stronger," my mother said quickly, as if that softened it. "You could handle it." Handle it. I thought about the years that followed, the interrogations, the punishments, the way every mistake I made afterward was treated as confirmation of a flaw my parents had already assigned me, the way I learned to over-explain, to apologize preemptively, to assume guilt even when I didn't understand the crime. "You let everyone believe I did it," I said slowly. "Teachers, relatives, friends." My father nodded once. "It was easier." Easier. I felt something inside me split. Not sharply, but deeply. Like a fault line finally giving way. "So you decided," I said, my voice steady now in a way that scared me, "that breaking one child was better than disappointing the favorite one." My mother's face tightened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I asked. "You punished me for something you knew I didn't do." My mother crossed her arms. "You're alive. You're successful. Look at you. It didn't ruin you." That was when I understood something that changed everything. They were proud of the damage. "You don't get to decide that," I said. "You don't get to decide what it cost me." My father frowned. "We did what we had to do to keep the family together." "No," I replied. "You did what was easiest for you." The kitchen felt smaller now, the walls closer. Every childhood memory I had stored away, every time I'd been told I was difficult, dramatic, unreliable, came rushing back, rearranging themselves into something terrifyingly clear. They hadn't misunderstood me. They had chosen me. Chosen me to carry the weight. Chosen me to absorb the blame. Chosen me because I was breakable in ways my parents could live with. "You never planned to tell me, did you?" I asked. My mother hesitated. Just for a second. "That depends," my mother said carefully, "on whether you were ready to hear it." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound was hollow, sharp. "You mean whether I'd still accept it?" My father stood up. "There's no point digging this up now." "No," I said. "There's a point. You just don't like it." Because now, finally, the story I had been living inside my entire life made sense. And the truth was worse than guilt. It was deliberate. I didn't remember sitting down, But suddenly, I was in the chair by the kitchen table, my hands flat on my thighs like I was trying to keep myself anchored to my body. My parents stayed standing. That felt important. So which mistake was it? I asked. The money? The cheating? The accident? My voice didn't shake. That surprised me most. My mother frowned. You don't need to go into details. I do, I said. I've been living inside them for years. My father exhaled through his nose. It was the account, my father said. The money your grandmother left. Your sibling accessed it early. Took more than they were supposed to. I closed my eyes. That memory had never left me. I had been 17, pulled out of class, sat down in the principal's office while my parents explained that I had made a serious mistake. I remembered the way my hands shook as I denied it. The way my mother cried. Not for me, but for the shame of it. They said I did it, I said quietly. You said I did it. My mother nodded as if confirming a fact. At the time, yes. And you grounded me for a year, I continued. You took my car. You told everyone I was irresponsible. My father crossed his arms. Actions have consequences. But they weren't my actions, I said. There was a pause. Not an uncomfortable one, a resigned one. You were already labeled as the difficult one, my mother said. You asked too many questions. You pushed back. People expected it from you. I felt something twist in my chest. So you let a lie settle because it fit the narrative. Yes, my father said simply. I laughed again, quieter this time. Do you know what that did to me? My mother waved a hand dismissively. It made you careful. It made you responsible. It made me afraid, I said. Of being misunderstood. Of being accused. Of trusting my own memory. My parents exchanged another look. That's life, my father said. Sometimes you carry things for the sake of others. I was a child, I said, and you carried nothing. The words hung there, heavier than anything else I'd said. My mother's voice sharpened. You always want to be the victim. I looked at my mother. You just admitted you sacrificed me. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. I thought about the years that followed that mistake. How every argument ended with, "This is just like before." How I learned to keep receipts, screenshots, timelines, evidence of my own innocence. How I never fully trusted praise because it felt temporary, conditional. Meanwhile, my sibling flourished, protected, encouraged, their mistakes framed as growth, their failures treated as stress. You didn't just blame me, I said slowly. You shaped who I became afterward. My father shrugged. You turned out fine. That word again. Fine. Do you know how many nights I stayed awake trying to remember something I hadn't done? I asked. How many times I wondered if I was lying to myself. My mother looked away. You're exaggerating. No, I said. I'm explaining. The realization settled fully then. Not just that my parents had blamed me, but that they had watched me suffer under that blame and decided it was acceptable collateral damage. Did you ever consider telling the truth? I asked. My father shook his head. It would have destroyed your sibling. And what did it do to me? My father didn't answer, because the answer didn't matter to my parents. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady, but my mind was clear in a way it had never been before. You didn't protect the family, I said. You protected the hierarchy. My mother scoffed. You're being dramatic again. No, I replied. I'm being accurate. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. My father frowned. Where are you going? Home, I said. Somewhere I'm not assigned blame by default. My mother's voice softened, almost pleading. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. I paused at the doorway. You already did. Years ago. As I stepped outside, the air felt colder, sharper. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the truth settle fully into place. I hadn't been punished because I was wrong. I had been punished because I was expendable. And once you see that, there's no way back to who you were before. The drive home felt longer than it should have, even though I took the same roads I always did. Every red light gave my mind just enough space to replay pieces of my childhood, like evidence finally being refiled under the correct name. Not guilty. I said it out loud once, alone in the car. The words felt strange in my mouth, like a language I should have learned much earlier. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my mind wouldn't stop connecting dots. Moments I had buried resurfaced with brutal clarity. The time my mother searched my room after the incident, pulling drawers open like she was looking for proof she had already decided existed. The way my father stopped defending me in public, even when relatives made jokes about my track record. The way my sibling cried when confronted, and how quickly the conversation shifted to comforting them, while I stood there, silent, absorbing the verdict. I had thought those memories hurt because I was sensitive. Now I understood they hurt because they were injustices I'd been trained to accept. The next morning, my sibling called. I stared at the phone for a long time before answering. "Hey," my sibling said cautiously, like they already knew something had changed. "Mom said you left upset." "Did my mother also tell you why?" I asked. Silence. Then, "They told you." It wasn't a question. "So you knew," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "I suspected," my sibling replied. "I was young. I didn't understand everything." I closed my eyes. "You let me take the blame." "I was scared," my sibling said quickly. "They told me not to say anything. They said it would ruin things." "Ruin what?" I asked. "Our family," my sibling said. "My future." There it was, the hierarchy spoken out loud. "And mine?" I asked. My sibling didn't answer. "I spent years believing there was something wrong with me," I continued. "I was punished, humiliated, monitored. You watched all of it." "I didn't ask for that," my sibling said, their voice tight now. "They chose." "Yes," I replied. "They did. But you benefited." That landed harder than anything else I'd said. I could hear it in their breathing. "I'm sorry," my sibling said eventually. "I really am." I believed they were sorry. That didn't mean it fixed anything. "I'm not calling for an apology," I said. "I'm calling to tell you something." My sibling waited. "I'm done carrying this," I said. "I won't protect the story anymore." "What does that mean?" my sibling asked, alarm creeping in. "It means if someone asks, I'll tell the truth," I said. "I'm not lying to make anyone comfortable again." "That's going to hurt Mom and Dad," my sibling said. I felt something steady settle in my chest. They already decided who should be hurt. When the call ended, I sat in silence, feeling the weight of what I'd just said. Not fear, not guilt. Finality. Over the next few weeks, the shift became visible. I stopped explaining myself to relatives who had never questioned my guilt, but now wanted reassurance that everything was fine. I stopped minimizing my own experiences to keep conversations smooth. When someone mentioned the old incident, I corrected them calmly. "That wasn't me," I'd say. My parents admitted it. Some people reacted with shock, some with discomfort, some with denial. But none of that was my responsibility anymore. My parents noticed. My mother called one evening, her voice sharp with accusation. "Why are people asking questions?" I smiled, just a little. "Because the truth has a way of resurfacing." "You're humiliating us," my mother snapped. "No," I replied. "I'm no longer protecting you." My father took the phone. "You're tearing the family apart." I thought about that accusation, the way it had always been used to silence me. "You did that when you decided one child was expendable," I said. My father hung up. Something strange happened after that. The anger I'd expected never really came. Instead, there was relief. Because for the first time in my life, my past wasn't something I had to defend or apologize for. It was something I finally understood. They hadn't broken me by accident. They had chosen me deliberately. And that meant the shame was never mine to carry. The fallout didn't explode the way I'd imagined. There were no screaming phone calls, no dramatic confrontations in driveways. What happened instead was quieter, and somehow worse. People began to hesitate around me. Relatives who had once spoken freely now chose their words carefully. Conversation slowed when I entered the room. Invitations arrived later, phrased vaguely, like they were testing whether I was still safe. I recognized the pattern immediately. I wasn't being punished for lying. I was being punished for telling the truth. My parents stopped calling altogether. Not angrily, strategically. Silence had always been their preferred tool. It let them frame themselves as wounded without having to explain why. Then my mother broke it. My mother invited me over to talk. Her words, neutral, controlled. The kind of invitation that pretends repair is possible while preparing another correction. I went. Not because I expected an apology, but because I wanted to see my parents clearly one last time. We sat in the living room this time. No soup, no distractions. My father sat rigidly in his chair, arms crossed. My mother perched on the edge of the couch like she was ready to stand up at any moment. "You've caused a lot of confusion," my mother began. I waited. "People are asking questions," my mother continued, "about the past, about things that don't need to be revisited." "They asked because they were told a lie," I replied. My father leaned forward. "You didn't need to correct them." "Yes," I said, "I did." My mother shook her head. "You always have to push. You can't let things stay settled." "They weren't settled," I said. "They were buried." My mother's eyes flashed. "You got through it. That should count for something." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, but it didn't control me this time. "You keep confusing survival with success," I said. "They're not the same." My father's voice dropped. "You're acting like we abused you." I met my father's gaze. "You admitted you sacrificed me." "That's not abuse," my mother snapped. "That's parenting." "No," I said calmly. "That's choosing one child's comfort over another child's safety." The room went still. My mother stood abruptly. "We are not apologizing for doing what we thought was best." That sentence finally clarified everything. They didn't regret the decision. They regretted losing control of the narrative. "I didn't come for an apology," I said, standing as well. "I came to tell you something." My parents both looked at me now, alert. "I'm done carrying this," I said, "and I'm done being available for conversations that require me to minimize it." My father scoffed. "So what? Now you're cutting us off?" "I'm changing the terms," I replied. "If we have a relationship, it won't include denial, it won't include gaslighting, and it won't include me being blamed by default." My mother's voice softened, dangerously. "You're asking for too much." "No," I said. "I'm asking for the bare minimum." My mother laughed once, bitter. "You've always had unrealistic expectations." That was the moment I stopped hoping. "I won't be coming around for a while," I said. "And if you talk about me to others, I expect honesty." My father stood. "You don't get to dictate that." "I just did," I replied. I left without waiting for permission, without waiting for the old fear to catch up. In the weeks that followed, the distance solidified. My sibling texted once, apologetic but vague. They wanted peace. They wanted everyone to move forward. I understood what my sibling meant. They wanted the discomfort to stop. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's compliance. I began noticing how much of my life had been shaped around avoiding blame, how often I anticipated conflict before it existed, how easily I assumed responsibility for things that weren't mine. Naming it didn't erase it, but it loosened its grip. For the first time, I let myself feel anger without immediately translating it into guilt. I let myself feel sadness without framing it as weakness. I let myself imagine a version of myself that hadn't been molded by constant self-defense. That version felt unfamiliar, but real. My parents told people I was holding on to the past, that I was rewriting history, that I was too sensitive. I didn't correct them, because I knew something they didn't. The truth doesn't need consensus to exist, and I had already spent enough of my life trying to earn permission to be believed. What surprised me most wasn't how angry I felt. It was how much lighter I felt once I stopped pretending it hadn't mattered. For years, I had carried myself like someone who needed to be careful, not just with my words, but with my reactions, my needs, my expectations. I had learned to scan rooms for danger that wasn't there anymore, to apologize before anyone asked, to over-prepare, over-perform, over-explain. I had told myself it was maturity. Now I saw it for what it was: conditioning. Once the truth was out, even quietly, my body started reacting differently. I noticed it first in small moments. When a coworker questioned a decision I'd made, my chest didn't tighten. When a friend misunderstood something I said, I corrected them without panic. When someone was disappointed in me, I didn't immediately assume fault. It felt unnatural, then it felt right. My therapist pointed it out one afternoon. "You're no longer trying to earn innocence," she said. "You already know you have it." That sentence stayed with me. I started remembering things I hadn't allowed myself to think about before. Not the big events, but the small ones. The way my parents used to watch me more closely than my sibling. The way my explanations were treated like excuses. The way I was praised only when I absorbed blame without complaint. "You're so mature," my mother used to say. What my mother meant was, "You don't make us uncomfortable." As that realization settled, another followed. Quieter, but just as heavy. They hadn't just blamed me for one mistake. They had built an identity around it. Once I was labeled the problem, everything made sense to my parents. My questions became defiance. My emotions became instability. My boundaries became selfishness. The role justified itself. And roles, once assigned, are hard to escape, especially when the people benefiting from them insist they're necessary. I saw the ripple effects everywhere. In my friendships, where I took responsibility for other people's moods. In my work, where I volunteered for blame before anyone asked. In relationships, where I confused intensity with intimacy and accountability with love. None of it had come from nowhere. It had been trained. One evening, my siblings showed up at my door unexpectedly. They looked uncomfortable, older somehow. "I didn't realize how bad it was for you," my sibling said after a long silence. I studied their face. The guilt was real. So was the distance. "You didn't have to," I replied. "You were protected. That was the point." My sibling nodded slowly. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," I said, "but you lived with the benefits." They swallowed. "What do you want from me now?" The question was honest. I appreciated that. "I want you to stop pretending it didn't happen," I said. "And I want you to understand that we won't have the same relationship we could have had." My sibling winced. "Is that permanent?" "I don't know," I replied. "But pretending costs too much." They left shortly after that. No argument, no resolution, just acknowledgement. That felt like progress, even if it wasn't comfort. My parents tried once more, indirectly. A message passed through a relative, suggesting we start fresh, that it might be time to put it behind us. I didn't respond. You don't start fresh with people who refuse to admit what they contaminated. What finally settled things wasn't confrontation. It was consistency. I stopped showing up where I was expected to shrink. I stopped engaging in conversations that reframed my pain as inconvenience. I stopped negotiating with people who only wanted my compliance. And slowly the pressure eased. Not because my parents understood, because they realized I was no longer available. The most unexpected change came in how I saw myself. I wasn't the strong one because I could endure anything. I was strong because I could leave what harmed me, even when it was wrapped in the language of family. They thought breaking me had been the safer option. What my parents never considered was that broken things don't disappear. They remember. And when they finally stop carrying what was never theirs to hold, they don't collapse. They stand up. The distance didn't feel dramatic once it settled in. It felt quiet, predictable, almost boring. And that, I realized, was why it worked. Without the constant emotional turbulence, my nervous system finally had space to recalibrate. I stopped bracing myself before family gatherings because I wasn't attending them. I stopped rehearsing responses in my head because no one was interrogating me anymore. The background hum of vigilance, something I hadn't known was optional, began to fade. At first, that absence felt like loss. Then it felt like relief. My parents tried one last time to reassert control, not through confrontation, but through nostalgia. A photo appeared in the family group chat. Me as a child, smiling too widely, arms stiff at my sides. The caption read, "We were such a happy family." No acknowledgement, no context, just a carefully curated memory offered like proof. I didn't respond. Because happiness that requires one person to absorb everyone else's damage isn't happiness, it's theater. In therapy, we talked about the concept of the identified patient, the child chosen, consciously or not, to carry the family's unresolved tension, the one whose flaws distract from everyone else's behavior, the one it's safest to blame. When my therapist explained it, I felt something click into place with startling precision. They didn't break you because you were weak, my therapist said. They chose you because you were resilient enough to survive it. That reframed everything. Resilience hadn't protected me. It had made me convenient. Once I understood that, the guilt I'd been dragging around for years lost its footing. Guilt assumes wrongdoing. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I had been assigned a role and punished for playing it too well. The clarity changed how I spoke about my past. I stopped saying, "I was difficult as a kid," and started saying, "I was blamed." I stopped calling myself sensitive and started calling myself observant. Language mattered more than I'd realized. It was the final place the lie still lived. My sibling and I spoke less after that. Not because of anger, but because proximity without honesty was no longer possible. We existed in parallel, cordial, careful, distant. That was healthier than pretending closeness had ever been equal. One afternoon, months later, my father emailed me. No accusation, no demand, just a single line. We did the best we could. I read it several times. Then I archived it. Because doing your best doesn't absolve you of the damage you choose not to repair. And explanations offered without accountability are just another way to end the conversation on your terms. I didn't need that anymore. What surprised me most was how my sense of self shifted once I stopped defining myself against my parents. I made decisions without asking myself how they would react. I trusted my perceptions without double-checking them against someone else's comfort. I allowed myself to feel anger without turning it inward. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged to me, not as a reaction, not as resistance, but as a fact. The child my parents had tried to break had grown into someone they no longer recognized. And that was the point. The last thing I let go of wasn't anger. It was hope. Not the healthy kind, the kind that believes in growth and change, but the quiet, exhausting hope that one day my parents would wake up and see me clearly, that they would look back and understand the cost of what they'd done, that they would say, without qualifiers or explanations, "We were wrong." When that hope finally dissolved, it didn't feel tragic. It felt clean. I stopped measuring moments by whether they would one day make sense to them. I stopped imagining future conversations where everything would be resolved if I just explained myself better. I stopped saving parts of my life for people who had already proven they would use them against me. That's when something unexpected happened. I started trusting myself, not in a motivational way, not with affirmations or grand declarations, in small, practical moments, when I remembered things accurately without questioning my memory, when I noticed unfairness and named it without apologizing, when I chose rest without justifying it as earned. The child my parents had broken learned how to reassemble herself without asking permission. I ran into my parents once more, months later, at a family event I hadn't realized they would attend. We exchanged polite nods. Nothing more. No confrontation, no tears. My mother studied me like she was trying to identify what had changed. I knew the answer. I was no longer carrying what belonged to them. My parents had once admitted, without shame, without hesitation, that they blamed me because it was easier to break one child than risk damaging the favorite one. They had said it like a strategy, like a necessary decision. What they hadn't understood was this: broken children don't stay broken forever. Some of them grow up and name what happened. Some of them stop accepting blame that was never theirs. Some of them walk away. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. My parents thought sacrificing me would preserve the family. What it actually did was teach me how to leave it. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in truth. And once you step into that truth, once you realize you were never weak, only chosen, you don't need their version of the story anymore. You finally get to live your own,